Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, featuring the sharpest minds in marketing, inspirational case histories, and weekly insights you can apply to your business. Find out why top CMOs rank this podcast among their favorites. Now, here's your host, Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
Hello, Renegade Thinkers. Here's the question of the day. Do you trust your gut instinct? I know I do. I do. I've been in this business a long time. I've had lots of experiences where my gut came through for me. So I believe in my gut. But I've been listening to a book lately. It's Malcolm Gladwell's latest book. It's called Talking with Strangers. I'm about a quarter of the way through it. But the first part of this book is pretty much an indictment of your gut instinct. And it goes like this. An example that he provides that I think was so interesting is, I'm going to give you a judge who is responsible for deciding whether or not someone should get bail. Is this person going to jump bail, or is this person going to commit a crime while they're on bail, or is it all going to be good? Now, this judge had 25 years of experience making this call over and over again. And what was remarkable, when they created an algorithm that got the same information the judge did without being able to see the individual or hear the individual, the algorithm was 20 times more likely to predict bad behavior than the judge. Part of it is our personal biases. We just think that someone is more likely to be innocent than guilty. We hear for positiveness. The same thing came up amazingly, and Gladwell talks about how bad spies are at guessing who the other spies are. It's amazing. So this notion of whether or not we can trust our gut is something that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about on the show. And what it really leads to is we're in a unique opportunity today in this world where we can test a lot of stuff where we don't have to trust our gut. And the expert on this is Carl Sukahara, who is the CMO of Optimizely, a company that describes itself as the world's leading experimentation platform. If you're familiar with Optimizely, it's really the home of the A/B test. That's sort of my understanding of the brand. But anyway, Carl, welcome to the show.
Well, hello, good afternoon. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's great. And by the way, love your name. My father is a Carl and my son is a Carl. So awesome to have a Carl on the show.
So we got the Carl triad going. I'm excited about that as well.
There it is. Yes, he was my dad. Actually, people got a kick out of the listeners know he was episode 100 when he was. We recorded a year ago at 92. People have enjoyed that. Anyway, you are a veteran of Silicon Valley. You've worked at Oracle, Evolve, and Burst, among others. So let's fast forward. You started at Optimizely about 2 years ago, a little more than 2 years ago. What was the sort of situation? And I'm just curious, what was your mandate?
Yeah, I think there's a few things, Drew. The situation was, the company had gotten to a certain point in its growth, and through, I'd say a subtle change in strategy, decided to spend more time really with enterprise customers. The company had grown, as you mentioned earlier, as an A/B testing tool, but primarily sold to small groups and practitioners more in a kind of a bottom-up sense. And what we realized is that's still important to seed the market bottom up, but one of the key to-dos, and both from Jay, the CEO, and the board, was, hey, let's help, I would say, pivot this to more of an enterprise company, where we, and I think what happened is there was a lot of evidence. We had customers like IBM and HP and big companies where they were saying, hey, look, we want to take this experimentation, test, and learn process. It's not a tools business. It is a strategic imperative for our organization. And, this is people like Michelle Peluso, the CMO at IBM, saying, we want to really take this out and make an enterprise system and practice. And so at the time, if you position yourself as an A/B testing tool, that's interesting, but I don't think that gets the attention of CMOs or heads of digital for some of the biggest firms in America and the world, for that matter. So really the imperative was, how do you kind of transform both the positioning, the messaging, and really the go-to-market motion, where it's not a velocity business, it's really a strategic business. And you can take that, to different roles in the organization, not just the marketing folks, but also to developers, product people who all want to make sure that when they deploy something interesting, it works. And you talked about the whole guesswork notion, but how do you communicate in a different way to make people know that this is a practice and not just a tool?
So when you arrived, because I checked the press release, Optimizely was calling itself the world's leading experimentation platform. And that to me was new language because I hadn't actually been on Optimizely in the last 2 years, sad to say. And that's a big promise, and it's much bigger than A/B testing, the experimentation platform. And so, okay, let's connect that. But it sounds like that message hadn't necessarily laddered up to enterprises on a broad level, seeing, oh, wait, this is a strategic imperative, as opposed to down at the sort of executional level test, this color versus that color. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we do have a phenomenal technology platform that does these experiments at scale. And, that's a huge winner. I mean, I think that the change we made, I think, Drew, which was important, is for what, right? And so why does this matter to your business, right? And so we pivoted the messaging to say, really, that what this is really about is experience optimization. So it was really a categorical positioning, which was very important here. Because at the end of the day, what are marketing leaders and business leaders and product and develop they're trying to do? They're trying to deploy experiences to their users, internal or external, that win. And when I say win, I mean that delight the users, that convert users, that drive more e-commerce revenue, drive more conversion from paid search ads, allow you to experiment on pricing. So these are important decisions at the business level, but they're all about the experience, right? It's about, the experience, the deployment of the experience, the testing of the experience. And so when you push this out at scale against your users, it wins, and it really provides and delivers the outcome that you need. But I think that second piece that I'm talking about, which is really the business relevance of experimentation, wasn't really quite there. And so we worked hard to build this categorical definition out called experience optimization.
And there are a lot of people fighting for the experience in different ways. I mean, I had Alicia Tillman, CMO of SAP, and of course they had recently completed their acquisition of, I think, Qualtrics. And of course their advertising had moved into this whole experience world. In fact, they've created some pretty funny ads around it. But what SAP is talking about when they're talking about experience and what you're talking about when you're talking about experience feel like they're kind of different, or are they the same?
Yeah, we really try and focus today, Drew. I mean, I think there's some overlap for sure, because, at the end of the day, when I say experience, I just think there's somebody at the end of that experience that you're trying to delight and, get them to engage with you, right? That's the similarity. I think the difference in what we do is really, really focused on the digital experience. So if you're trying to walk your customer or please your customer or convert your customer, whether or not they're, kind of before the acquisition phase, during acquisition, you're trying to get them to check out and buy something, you're trying to create loyalty, we kind of focus on that in the digital channel. So, if you have a website, a mobile app, we even do a lot of things with media companies on over the top because, people are cutting the cord. So I'm sure if you use Hulu or something like that, and you want to use an internet app to watch your TV show or your movie, that's also a channel now to talk to your customers. So we think of those as really a collection of digital experiences. And I think that's where we kind of segment ourselves off. And the other piece that we segment ourselves off from others is we really, I believe, are the leaders in the whole way to use data, to use evidence, to use testing and statistics to really make sure that every time you roll out a new one of those, again, Drew, these changes could be as small as a button color, text. It could be but it could be complicated. It could be a pricing model. It could be all kinds of things. You will know with an experimentation mindset that it's going to win because you've tested it. You've created evidence that it will work and convert the way you want it to. And then you have the opportunity to deploy this at scale. And that's kind of how we look at this, is about the digital experiences and touch points and making sure everyone you roll out is a winner.
Cool. All right. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to dive into a lot of this stuff. There's stuff to unpack here. Definitely. Stay with us. Did you know that Renegade Thinkers Unite was ranked number 2 of the top 10 podcasts for CMOs by Crackerjack Marketing. Wow, we're really honored. Now, we couldn't do that without amazing guests, and we've had some amazing CMOs on this show, and also terrific listeners like you all. If you like what we do here, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player. That way, you'll never miss an episode. Also, as a special thanks, I'd like to send you a free ebook on Renegade Thinkers. Now, for that, just email drew@renegade.com. Now, let's get back to the show. Okay, we're back, and we've been talking about the importance of what they call experience optimization, and you mentioned something, Carl, about experimentation and the importance of experimentation. I am curious, if I am a B2B company, let's say I'm a software service company, and I have not been doing that. I probably have a fair amount of marketing technology in place. Obviously, I have Salesforce and I have some kind of marketing automation, and I probably have a Tableau. I have a stack. It depends on how sophisticated they are. But so they're doing like demand gen campaigns. They're doing all sorts of content marketing out there. Where does Optimizely and what you guys do fit in that world?
Yeah, there's so many places, Drew. So just to take some examples, think of something so simple, right? You're doing paid search. You're doing Google AdWords, right?
Yep.
I guess I would ask this question, is the messaging in your ads right? Is the language you're using correct? Is the experience that happens when somebody clicks through the link and gets to your landing page? Do you have the right images, colors, offer strategy? It's just taking one example. And how do you know? How do you know if you can't get 10% better, 20% better? Or think of this, maybe you have a self-service acquisition model and you get somebody to a paywall, right? So you just say, hey, here's your free version of the product, and now I have to pay, right? How do you make sure that paywall is right? How many screens in the paywall should you have? Should you have one expandable experience? Should you have 3 different click-throughs? What's the pricing? Should this be $9.95 for the first month, to get from the trial version to one user? There's so many things like that where, we help the marketer convert.
And that's the thing that's really interesting to me. I mean, I've been for a long time looking at our clients and rambling about, or sometimes ranting about, the notion of cost per say lead, and that people optimize for cost per lead, right? And the problem is with that is, of course, not all leads are equal. And even if you do it on a cost per acquisition basis, not all customers acquired are good customers. Sometimes they came in on a price promotion, they leave on the other end, you got churn, you got a high cost of acquisition, relatively speaking, but very low lifetime value. So we're been trying to unsuccessfully get someone out there to come up with a cost per happy customer acquired, right? So that you acquire the right customers for your organization, which are ones that really match, because of the importance of every customer represents either someone who can talk about your business or someone who can say something nasty about it. So what I get concerned about, or naturally when I hear you can test every little bitty thing, is that you can optimize for sort of driving clicks, right? You can always do that. You can optimize for clicks, but those clicks don't have the same value. So how does this work? And I imagine this is where the integration with all the other tools start to matter, but how do you sort of deal with that sort of micro testing versus the big picture? Particularly, and I'm going to give you context for this, I'm really talking about companies that have a 12 to 18 month sales cycle, have 10 people on the buying committee. It's tricky.
Yeah, I mean, look, the nice thing about platforms like ours, and there's others, of course, is that you can test for any kind of outcome you want, right? So it doesn't have to be something just as click-through rate. Maybe there's something like, how do you get people to want to request a demo, right? I mean, let's just think of the classic B2B use case, right? And almost every place I've been, there's certain actions like contact sales, or I want to talk to an advisor, or I want to look at a demo that, I don't know about since the dawn of mankind, but since a long period in our existence, those are high converting actions, right? And so, as we all know, and I think Forrester Research has talked about this ad nauseum for about a decade, most of that evaluation or engagement of your prospect, and even if it's a customer you're trying to expand to, it happens without you knowing. Like maybe you have these people cookied, maybe you don't, but you have a lot of anonymous evaluation. And so the whole point is once they do start to engage with your properties where you can, kind of look at actions, how do you convert to those pieces? Obviously, if you have kind of the blended, digital plus human conversion that takes place in, n number of months, 3, 6, 9, 12, depending on the size of your transaction, you need to think about that. But there's always high converting actions, right? And this could be even we work with, a company in B2B such as Atlassian, right? Atlassian, here's a really interesting company. Like, congratulations to them. They are growing like wildfire, selling to technical people with very few salespeople, right? And so when you think about what we do for a company like that, they have a lot of, self-service ways to expand, right? Like I'm using Jira or Bitbucket or any of their products, but hey, maybe I'm announcing something new. Can I present that in their actual user experience of people using the product where people go, oh my God, that's a really interesting add-on. I should be, taking a look at that. That is an experience in its own right. That's one that can lead directly to revenue. So the point I'm making is, those are two extremes of a model, right? One which is more organic and grows through kind of just user adoption and in-product experiences, all the way to a large company which says, hey, I got a brand new, sales process going for my software or enterprise software piece where I'm just trying to convert to key action points that drive down the funnel, higher bookings conversion. And this is something we all know as, journey-oriented marketers. What is that combinational logic of people? And what is the combinational logic of events I'm trying to do? And again, the benefit of this platform, it can go all the way to, helping you measure what actually drives a revenue conversion or to a high converting action, which is, part of the journey to get a large purchase done.
So I'm curious by the way, we had, not the CMO, but we had Atlassian on the show and funny, part of the conversation was just, they had a very interesting culture in terms of not serving coffee. So they get people to go out and talk, but also, they have the advantage with so many companies do is they have essentially a free trial product that makes the barrier to trial really, really low, which is a great thing when that works. I think the thing that you said there that really helped me focus on it, if I think about high converting actions, years ago, I talked to John Miller when he was at Engagio, and he talked about if they go to the pricing page, I know they're interested. That's the moment that we really have to jump on it. Similarly, I know from other clients that we worked with, it, if they hit the demo button, they're interested. So optimizing the demo experience or how they go through that makes a lot of sense because those folks are really, they're prime. You don't want to blow it there. It's just so interesting to me because I've seen so many times where you micro tested your way out of a big idea. And what's hard when you're dealing with big B2B purchases is that you do have so many decision makers involved and they do come at it from a different standpoint. But if you present different messages to each of the decision makers about your company, when they come together as a committee, you fail. And you don't even see that. So you could have optimized each of those individual ones on separate messaging and it seemed like it was good, but the decision was made when the committee came together, not online, but offline. So it's tricky. And this is this balance between sort of this micro and the macro picture of what your company is about and what you stand for. So I don't know. It's a complicated thing. And I get it. I've also seen companies where, and it's funny, even on a B2C level where they had a choice, they could improve their click rates by going off brand, right? There's a question. I just improved my click rates. by going off brand. Is that a good call?
Well, I think that, one of the things that I think brand is important. And, I think brand is extremely important. So, it just depends on how strong they think their brand is and what it stands for. But, we actually try to think about how you can enforce your brand in the context of your testing program. Because, I think you have to put a little bit of governance and guardrails around testing. That's one of the things we really believe in, especially when we're dealing with larger B2B entities. And, I mentioned IBM, but we have HP and a lot of other big tech companies as customers. But you have to really allow for governance. And so part of that governance may be, look, I'm going to create kind of a brand safe environment in which you can test. So you can put offers out there and other things, but here's kind of how you can create kind of a compliance oriented framework to test. And again, this is something that is, really is a byproduct of how the organization wants to think about their brand. But, we want to give them that flexibility, because I think you're right, Drew. Like, you can't just let this thing run wild, right? And so we've thought about that and thought about how do you, not only have some of that capability in the product to drive governance, but, some of this is just organizational practice, right? And a lot of the customers that we work with, they not only benefit from the platform, but really, we've done this thousands of times with, we have like a third of the top interbrand companies in the world, right? So we've done this so many times with very successful orgs. And part of that is, how do you kind of encapsulate the product discipline with an organizational structure discipline where, you kind of know how you should be creating ideation, how you should be prioritizing that stuff, get it scored by different people, building really a test pipeline, how do you isolate audiences. So there's a lot of stuff in the practice that's important to do. It can't be, I think you hit it on the head, you can't be just kind of, testing gone wild. I mean, that's just not what we're trying to do.
No testing gone wild. Okay, perfect place, because we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the opposite of testing gone wild and really provide, if we can, a primer for setting up, we'll just call it an ideal B2B experience testing machine. So stay with us.
You've been listening to another great interview on Renegade Thinkers Unite with Drew Neiser. But the value doesn't end there. As a listener, you can download a free ebook from Drew, Renegade Thinkers, interviews with 11 trailblazing CMOs any business can learn from. Top marketing thought leaders and proven executives from Time Warner, American Express, and Chico's, and others. Get your free copy at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook. For listeners only at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook.
So let's start as we think about testing. Maybe you could start by saying, this is where testing goes wrong when, so we can just sort of set the framework.
Yeah.
Off the rails, because you need governance and guardrails. Well, when does it go off the rails?
Yeah, I'd say, at the highest level, one thing I would avoid for any of the people listening to this is, what are you testing for? Right? I mean, this sounds really basic, Drew, but we've seen programs which, don't have, I would say senior level sponsorship where what you're shooting for. What are you shooting for? Is it acquisition? Is it share of wallet? Is it NPS? I mean, what are you trying to do? And so I think testing programs gone bad are the ones where you don't really know how you're going to line up with the important objectives of the company. I mean, that sounds so basic, but I think that happens on occasion. And, again, because, that's kind of a two-edged sword. When you do line up with the key business objectives of the organization, then you have a real huge winner on your hands, because the whole concept of test and learn, you don't get them all right. You'll find out which ones are actually going to move the needle the wrong way, and you will only deploy the ones that are moving the needle the right way. So if you want to talk about a departmental impact to the business, it's sort of avoid the bad and do more of the good. And that's kind of how the program goes. Well, I'd say another way that the program can go poorly is, you just don't have, kind of alignment between the people that are doing the testing and the important lines of business, which it could be marketing, could be the product team, in some cases could even be development. And sometimes testing is an expertise that you can create with the right structure. We've seen a lot of places, create a kind of a center of excellence model that supports different lines of business. The BBC does that at scale right now. We see others where, they kind of want to put it in the different lines of business and let them focus on different parts of the funnel. And that's fine too. The folks at Sky TV have stuff, even though this is more of a B2C example, where they're thinking about the customer service angle and how they can make sure that experience really drives loyalty by making sure that either the online or offline customer experience is outstanding every single time. So I would say those are kind of two things I would focus on. Alignment with the business objectives. People get that wrong. It's not very good. They may have the wrong structure, and they don't think about return on investment, because we've seen dramatic improvements in a return on investment with this type of capability. And so to kind of get those three things right, then your probability of being successful with this is really high.
And it's so one of the things that I think a lot of people think about when they think about A/B testing and optimizing is its acquisition. And you just mentioned retention. I'm curious, because when we think about B2B marketing, our priority is employees, then customers, then prospects in terms of communicating particularly when you're creating or launching a new campaign. I'm curious, do any of your customers actually test employee engagement and say likelihood to recommend, and do they do anything on that level?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I'd say for the most part, Drew, I don't know what the percentage is, 80% or something is customer facing through the whole cycle. But we do have that 20%. And I'll give you an example, which, I can't mention the name, but, think about insurance, right? You have insurance folks, and, many of them, still have a large network of either direct or affiliate agents, right? And so, if you can get agents or salespeople for that matter to engage with an experience that helps their productivity out in the field, sometimes this is tens of thousands of people, right? In a large organization. So even this example I gave you with contact center, right? Like imagine I can go to a contact center experience and say to someone, hey, that flow of engagement you have with your customer, even if it's physical, even if you're sitting with a headset on, having a phone call with a prospect, how are you supposed to answer questions? What kinds of documents should you push to that customer? All those things can be tested in an operational flow, right? And so again, it is a digital experience, because at the end of the day, the agent's sitting there and screen pops are happening on his screen telling them what to do. But, you can test all kinds of stuff. And that's really, kind of getting to the customer through a next level, right? Like, here's an example. Like, would you want to test parts of your sales engagement process? Like when you get a prospect to stage 4, what 2 or 3 things do you want them to do in that next level, trying to get from stage 4 to closed won? Maybe you want to test that. Maybe you want to test that with a new product. So there's so many things you can do. Again, these might be digital experiences where someone, connects to Salesforce or something and looks at their, here's my next part of my, sales plan to close customer XYZ. But there's all kinds of ways to think about doing testing all the way through internally, things that face your internal audience, which is your employees, ultimately to serve your customer better.
Yeah, I love that. So, and I could see easily sort of testing whether it's sort of message or motivational ideas against the sales force. I can see certainly in a call center. I had the CEO of Pega on the phone, and we talked about their machine learning tool for next best action, where someone from Verizon knows that you've called and you're a Verizon customer and you have an iPad and a cell phone. The next best action might be to say, hey, we have a special deal on the Apple Watch that you could activate via Verizon. And it's remarkable because they have so many data points. That's sort of how, machine learning can work. I'm wondering, as we sort of try to get some helpful hints here to folks, what do you think are the most basic elements that B2B marketers are missing in their sort of experimentation flow?
Wow, that's a good question. I mean, I think there's many. Honestly, I think a lot of B2B marketers, especially if they've learned, if they're data driven and they think about, kind of a closed loop analysis of things they do in their spend. I think that they're doing maybe some basic testing on things like landing pages and things like that. I do think there's a much more interesting set of tests that they can run, right? And that is things like, even when you think about your website, there's all kinds of stuff you can do. Here's an example. Somebody comes to your website and they do a search, right? I'm searching for blah, right? What do you show them? All search is not created equal. What do you show them? Are there different search algorithms that can produce higher actions to those high converting events? I'll bet you there are, right? Because we've seen this in many other kinds of things. They should all, in my opinion, you should be also doing what I would call painted doors. Like, what if we had this thing? Maybe you do a painted door against a small sample and see if people click the button, right? Wow, if we had that thing, that would really work. So you kind of get ahead of the deployment. And this is really thinking more about the product marketing or the product management audience. Like, hey, my God, look, everybody in the product is clicking this button and the button's popping up saying, thank you for clicking the button. This is a forward-looking feature and we'd love to enroll you in our pre-evaluation. There's all kinds of things you can do. And again, I'm thinking more about the down funnel, I would call it, kind of events. And this is stuff that I think in the B2B world, people are just starting to get their arms around. I think we see a lot of experiences because we have a lot, most of our customer base, probably 2/3 or more, is B2C companies. And a lot of them do this already, I'm in an experience, hey, if I click this button to say, get 5 new, songs or 5 new subscription users for free, it's a kind of a consumer mindset on innovation. And so I would love to see more B2B companies do this kind of thing. And, it's really a lesson that I think all of us can learn from big brands like Amazon and Netflix, right? These folks experiment at crazy scale. And they do so because instead of going into, sessions and sessions and sessions and meetings and blah, 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 and PowerPoints and Google Slides, why don't you just take it out there? And if you're a big enough company, expose it to a few percentage points of your user base with pretty low risk and ask, just find out what's going to work. And it clears up a lot of the, what I would call innovation fog of, oh my God, we have to have 7 meetings. And then, oh, we have to do this 50-slide Google slide deck. And, oh, we got to get all these people, if you have the right mindset, and we see some of our strong B2B customers doing this today, then you can really drive innovation. You can drive innovation in kind of offer strategy. You can drive innovation in product. You can drive innovation even in trying new ideas. Like, imagine if you're, and one could, we could have a discussion whether or not product managers and product marketing people are really marketing or product people, but maybe they're both. What should we even think about building this new feature? Does anybody even care? So why not find some empirical evidence about that gives you a hypothesis versus having a user group with 50 people and assuming that represents your 20,000 customers, right? There's some ways to balance the soft and the hard testing to really help you innovate at speed.
And that's interesting. And so I'm with you all the way. Testing offer strategy makes a lot of sense. That would be relatively easy. Testing sort of product features. I love the red door and over here and seeing if you get folks interested in it. I'm interested in when you have an existing product and let's say it's a platform, but it exists separate from your website. Do you have integrations that you do actually within products? Because if it's not, that's where I was sort of lost you a little bit because I love that idea. How would someone actually, does anybody care about this feature and you only want to show it to existing customers who've already been into the platform, if you will?
Yeah, so Drew, one of the things that we brought to market, and again, I don't want to have this be a product commercial, but this is actually from demand from our customers, is to really be able to do testing and experiments in product, and it's really more of a code-based product because even you mentioned earlier, you might be wanting to deploy machine learning, right? Like a machine learning algorithm. Well, maybe you should test that algorithm. Like, how does that work against our current way that we have a conversation with the customer, right? Maybe I should have two variations of something that would be, something like, what product should I recommend? Like, hey, they've gone through and they're starting to, browse around the site, and we're collecting all this stuff in Marketo, and you're creating interesting moments. Like, but there may be something that's, in the product. Hey, and by the way, look what they're doing in the product. Oh my God, look, they're reacting better to this feature versus that feature. Maybe there's two variations of the same feature. This is something we do in the product, and we look at this as, what we call feature flagging, where I can say, let's build two things like a pricing algorithm and expose them to different samples of the populace, and which one drives more conversion. So we can do this on the code base, and that's, again, actually in the product. And so, and if I'm because you have the opposite effect too. Like, what if you're a travel company, right? Here's a good example, or an airline, and these are real examples. I just can't mention the names. Maybe I should test this new thing. And one could argue if travel, the product is really the website or the plane, right? I mean,
Right.
but I'm going to test this new thing, and this new thing is, hey, I'm going to come up with some different options for a new affinity for my frequent flyers, right? Hey, you get X. Well, that's probably a code-based thing, because someone's in the website or in the experience or in the mobile app, but you can test that. And you can test that in code, whether it's in JavaScript or React or Objective-C or any kind of code base, because that's something really interesting. Because really what you want to avoid if you're a product person or even a marketing person is, don't blow up the reservation, right? And so if you find that you're adding something into the actual quote product or reservation flow, oh my God, if I roll that out at scale, it's going to erode e-commerce booking by 4%. Well, we can help you predict that, right? And so again, that's an in-product thing. And as a former product guy myself, the last thing you always want is to blow up the site or blow up the product, right? And so, so number of years ago, it's actually our fastest growing product today, is being able to do these kind of code level testing things, so that again, this affects both the marketer and the product leader developers. Like, should I roll this out at scale? Oh, good. Well, thank God I tested it. So now I can pull it back easily and make sure that it works.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because there's flow, and you could have some drop off. But from a marketing standpoint, marketing would say, this would give us sort of competitive news that we could talk about. We really want this feature, get it out there. And it's so interesting because that's you may find out before you market it, because sometimes you have to create demand for things. Yeah. But anyway, I want to, as we wrap up this thing, one of the things that I've been working on for quite a while, and frankly, it's a struggle, is to try to simplify on a broad level. So CMOs have a very difficult time sort of saying brand, showing brand value in the board. Brand is this fuzzy thing, and they have a tough time until brand goes away, and then all of a sudden everybody in the board understands because their stock price is lower because there was a crisis in trust. But anyway, in my dream world, there are blended metrics that exist that for employees, customers, and prospects that are predictive of future success. And I believe that these are testable variables, but the goal is to radically simplify them. And the reason to radically simplify them is eventually you have to present these to people. And if you give them 50 metrics, their eyes are going to roll over. And so that's the idea. So I'm wondering from your standpoint and how you could help inform. I love the culture of experimentation, the need for this to always be testing. Totally agree with that idea as you're optimizing to something, right?
Yes.
And you're optimizing to employee satisfaction and advocacy. You're optimizing to customer satisfaction and advocacy, and you're optimizing to lifetime value of prospective customers. So those are the big things. How can you help sort of inform this? And this is me talking way too long, but I have a vision when I hear all the things you can test is 1,000 and 1,000,000 variables, and some CMOs, just pulling their hair out, thinking, "Oh my God, yeah, we could test everything," and they get lost in the experimentation. So help us sort of bring this experimentation back up to some simplified metrics, if that makes any sense at all.
Sure. I mean, again, I think those metrics, Drew, kind of depend on what's the company trying to do. And I mean, this sounds so crazy, but so here's an example. We have a large B2B customer, you know, Fortune 500 kind of a thing. They've traditionally sold, I would say, a big product to big enterprises. And, you know, they basically said, hey, look, I've got to be much better at selling to down market, right? And so, which is much more self-service. So the whole point is like align your testing program to that, right? If that's a key corporate initiative, like that's the key to everything. You know, if you're lined up with the key initiatives of the business, and then, you know, I think hopefully most of my counterparts in B2B marketing have some idea of, you know, what actual stages do you want to take a prospect through, even if it's a 9-month sales cycle, right? Because, you know, if you do any kind of journey mapping, even if someone's mid-funnel, you should be able to figure out like, oh, well, if they're mid-funnel and I can get them to do an ROI analysis and have me present a competitive presentation, oh, well, that really gets them to closed won at a much higher velocity. I mean, these are basic things that most people should know. So, okay, great. Those are your actions. You want to get them to consume an ROI analysis, and, you know, maybe they'll do that behind your back and on your website, or get them to, you know, say, hey, click here and you'll get your, you know, we'll send an you know, whatever, an advisor or a professional services person to give you a competitive bake-off report, right? I mean, so there's always those kinds of actions. But if you, to me, if you know like where your process gets stuck and what you're trying to do, like if what you're trying to do is acquire more SMB customers or whatever the case may be, then test to improve those steps. It's all about steps, Drew. Like, you know, we've all grown up in the world of, you know, Salesforce and Marketo and everything else where, you know, there's stages and steps, and where are you getting hung up? And I think if you understand your funnel, you know, try and experiment with the parts of the funnel that are the most problematic, because you might be able to move the needle in a big way. And then all of a sudden your program gets more funding and, you know, you can really show, and I know for CMOs, it's how do you show that evidence of value to the ultimate things in the business, which is the income statement, right? And so then you can really show how you're driving velocity. You know, I mean, I use the example, we have examples from automotive manufacturers, right? Even though that, you know, nobody buys their, you know, their car on the website for the most part, although some people are starting to. But, you know, in that case, you know, if I'm an automotive provider, I'm trying to help the dealers interactively get the customer to schedule a test drive or configure a car, right? Does that close the car? No. But if I can make the experience, you know, drive people more predictably to, you know, scheduling a test drive or configuring a car, I win. Because down at the physical world, that dealer gets a huge high converting lead. And so, again, I wish I had a more blanket answer for you, but it
No,
just
it's
depends
hard.
on,
No, but
yeah, it depends on what the company's trying to do, you know?
yeah, and I heard a lot of things that I think are valuable that I'm gonna and much in there, and there's a lot to digest. But so, I mean, what's so important in all of this is you've got to start at the end, right? Where do you want to get to? And
Yeah.
then as you sort of look at it and say, okay, we're going to break it, as you said, break it into stages. Great. Okay. And then what within those stages would make the biggest difference? And I think that's the thing that you could do 1,000 experiments, but the reality is if you're starting on a program of testing, you want to test the big things, right? Because those are the ones you don't want to be testing on a micro level when there's big issues at stake. You only get to a micro level when you've solved the big ones, right? Because you could have a product proposition that's wrong, and that would be worth testing. So I think I'm going to wrap up by saying the connection here is you can test your way to innovation. You really can. And I think the mindset, the renegade mindset here is think big, but don't rely on your gut necessarily, right? And you create this opportunity for folks in your organization to say, you know what, I don't have to have the answer. I have to understand the problem. I have to understand where we're going, and then I'm going to test my way to success. And I think that feels like a very good, solid footing for any CMO to be on. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think, the key thing, again, the way we kind of look at the market, there's some people doing this a lot. There's some people that are doing very little, and there's some people doing none, right? So my advice, honestly, Drew, is just get started.
Right.
Because it's surprising. I mean, I think we have worked together with this gentleman named Stefan Tomke. He's a professor at the Harvard Business School. And, he has some really great anecdotes about experimentation in the digital world and why, if you don't do it, you're potentially circling the drain. Because if your competitors are doing this and you're not, then in theory, they know what to deploy that is winning and you don't, right? Like nobody wants to be Toys R Us. I love Toys R Us as a parent and taking my kids there, but them and Blockbuster never kind of got with the program of modernization and innovation and really thinking, as you would describe as renegade thinking. Everybody laughed at Netflix in the beginning. Ha ha ha, Netflix, oh my God, And everybody also in the beginning, I don't know, years ago, they laughed at Amazon. Books, Bezos, oh my God, but those kind of organizations brought this kind of thinking of, hey, maybe I've got some really smart people, but I don't have all the answers, and my people cannot create all the answers. Because here's the bottom line, Drew, to me. Customers and users are extremely unpredictable. Like when we talk about the genesis of Optimize, so we use an example because our founder got this whole idea started around the Obama campaign. And he was the head of digital for Obama. And look, I'm not trying to make a political statement here, but he tried all these different experiences to see what would get consumers to engage on the obama.org website and donate money or join the campaign. And I show that test to hundreds of business leaders, and they almost always get it wrong. And so what your intuition will tell you is often wrong, because you're not selling to yourself. You're selling to a broad swath of companies and individual personas. And it's hard to predict. I mean, a new device comes out, a new camera on the iPhone, like, are people going to use it? Like, it's really hard to predict how users are going to behave, especially in a complex journey. So test it, try it.
Yeah, test
everybody
it and
knows
try
where everybody knows where their funnel gets stuck. I mean, just about, right? And whether you're trying to acquire, or like, how come our NPS is so crappy with this class of customers? Well, why don't you test the dialogues and your interactive experience until your NPS gets better? It's not impossible. We have customers doing that today.
All right. Perfect place for us to wrap up. Almost exactly where we started, which is, as good as your gut instinct is, it ain't that good. And you don't want to be the last team in baseball to introduce Moneyball. Let's get some smart learning out there through experimentation. All right. Carl, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Drew. I've really enjoyed it, and really nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. And to the listeners who've stayed with us all the way through on your longer commute, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go right away when you pull off the side of the road and give us a 5-star review on Apple or iTunes or your favorite channel. And until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.